Welcome back for more from our workshop in the 2021 NICE project. That leads us really well into influence on generations of fans because, like I said at the beginning, the popularity, I mean, if you just go back and think about that list of all the books that were written after Burroughs initially wrote the first 12, then he wrote 12 more, and then more and more and more were written either authorized by him or his estate. And that's just the books. I can offer to send you that list if you want a hard copy of it. But anyway, but in pop culture, one of the things I wanted to talk about just briefly, Disney World built a treehouse, a Tarzan treehouse. This is Disney World in California. Um, I mean, that's a pretty big pop culture. If you get something built in a Disney based on your book, that's pretty big. So kudos to Edgar Rice Burroughs for the incredible, treehouse cabin that Clayton built for his poor weak little pregnant English wife. I mean, I find that pretty interesting. There's so many movies and television. We started out with Johnny Weissmuller. There's over 30 full-length feature films that Weissmuller is part of. He was the iconic manly man. I mean, look at him. He's just adorable, isn't he? But I think it's easy to have fun with that part of it. As far as thinking about the fun parts of Tarzan through the years, but you also have to look through a modern lens and think about how this book has contributed to systemic racism and prejudice and discrimination, and we talked a lot about that last year when we talked about Gone with the Wind, because similar to this book, it was such a popular book. And I think when you look at some of the pop culture uh, things, whether it's TV, movies, cartoons, whatever, you have to kind of keep that in mind. Have they evolved with the times or not? And I would be able to recommend certainly, as dated as the original Johnny Weissmuller movie Tarzan the Ape Man from 1932 is, as a black and white film, and it's it got 1932 all over it, it's still worth watching. And Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, the 1984 film starring Christopher Lambert, is a little more faithful to the book, whilst also attempting to put the story in a less racist, white supremacist light. I recommend that one. It has a lot of good stuff in it. And you can also check out The Legend of Tarzan, which is a 2016 film. It's more historically contextualized update, if you will, starring Alexander Skarsgård as Tarzan, and Christoph Waltz and Samuel Jackson are in it, and they portray real life historical figures who were in the Congo at that time that the story is set. Waltz plays the brutal Belgian Captain Leon Rom, and Jackson plays Black American Civil War soldier George Washington Williams. And the story follows Tarzan, John Clayton now. He's living in London, and he's convinced by Samuel L. Jackson's character, to return to his former home in the jungles of Africa to investigate and try to do something about the claims of slavery, of African tribesmen being kidnapped and taken into slavery. So those are three movies I can recommend. And then Sarah E., I believe you have some notes on some other more modern interpretations of Tarzan.
Well, yes. Yeah. I am most fascinated by how we have tried to adapt this 100-year plus old story. And so I know, Deborah, you said that you had seen some of the movies. Do you remember anything about the movies that you saw?
Now I remember the yodel yell. And
It's
just
hard
like
to
I was
forget.
upset when the main characters in The Lion King got killed by evil. I was really upset when the good gorillas or good monkeys got killed by the evil monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. I don't know. And I think that this question came up maybe one or two workshops ago when we were first introducing this. And it's like, which one is the real, true, honest civilization? The British. I'll just call it the British one. We know what that means, or the jungle one. And I enjoyed the jungle. I didn't want him to leave the jungle.
No,
I didn't want him to get caught up in all of the pretentiousness, and because he was just so more real and so more close to nature and so much more human, that I didn't really want him to leave, because he thrived well, and he became British literate, and he got all this other kind of stuff going on, but you don't need to read in the jungle, and he was able to be the top survivor and still be very kind and compassionate and all that a human could be in the milieu of the jungle. So I remember I didn't like it when he left the jungle.
Yeah. Well,
So,
if you ever do read this book, you will find that he's lonely. And when he decides to leave the apes and go try to find his own kind, as it were, he's a lonely guy. And it's really kind of sad, because he knows he's leaving everything that is simple and to him natural and wonderful, but he's just so lonely. And he wants to know what do people like him live like. This book has a lot more depth to it than some of the film and TV stuff. But Sarah E., go ahead.
Yeah, no, I thank you for bringing that up, Deborah, because there are people who agree with you to the extent that they wrote their movie version so he doesn't leave the jungle.
That's right.
So what
just one of those big emotions get caught in your throat as a little kid, and you don't really know why it's caught there, but you're overcome with sadness that. And I wouldn't have known how to describe it back then as a kid when I was going through the movie and experiencing it, but
I mean, he is king of the jungle while he's in that environment. Why would he give up that sort of wilderness throne? So what I did is I picked 3 retellings, and the first one I wanted to mention is I just found this one last week. It's a Korean manga. Manga is like the story told through illustrations.
Yeah.
And it is a version of Tarzan. And as I started reading it, I'm like, wait a second.
This is Tarzan. What?
So the fact that this is something that is currently being written, because they release it episodes at a time. So it's currently being written in Korean, I think says something to the longevity and that it speaks to multiple cultures. Now the plot is not exactly the same. It's called Totem's Realm. There's a modern young woman who's lost in the jungle. She's rescued by a strong loincloth wearing wild man. Instantly loves and protects her. And she does say at one point, what are you, Tarzan? So, it's in the author's mind that this is a Tarzan spinoff of sorts.
Right. Fan fiction.
Fan fiction, yes. Again, the plot of the 2 stories are not exactly alike, but there is the element of our hero is both wild and human. He's utterly honest because he's never learned how humans dissemble. And then there's the animal attraction between our 2 leads. And the main adjustments, the adaptations I'm seeing to a 2021 audience are empowering our female lead. Like, she may seem to be physically weak, but she has magical powers to heal people because it's manga.
All right.
And she's sexually liberated. And they did try to at least turn the native population into a group of their smart individuals, not like this mass of inferior people as we see with Burroughs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how far will that continue to be a fairly positive trait? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The author has not finished this manga yet.
So we've got 24 books to get through. If they're going to follow through.
One other one I wanted to talk about is Disney's Tarzan, which is a lot of people's entry point for this story.
Mm-hmm.
It was released in 1999, and the main theme is adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And so, both of you, have you seen the Disney
Yes,
Tarzan?
that was my kid's Tarzan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deborah, yes, no, you've seen
No,
Disney?
not that one.
Okay.
Oh, you
Yeah.
should watch it. It's fun. Yeah, it's a Disney. It gets your heart. It gets you. It gets you.
Yeah, I mean, Disney never hesitates to rewrite a plot.
That's right.
There are not sacred things to Disney.
No.
But I do think that if they were going to choose a theme, that was a good one to choose.
Yeah.
There are some beautiful scenes where the mother, Kala, who is played by Glenn Close, is just singing these beautiful songs about how, it doesn't matter what you look like and that you're different. We both have hearts and they both beat and we love each other. And I can see where, being a kid watching this, if you're adopted, that is a really powerful message.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of who is your family, and do you have to leave people who are not exactly like you to go join people who are like you? I feel like there are probably adoptees who probably struggle with the where do I fit in?
Yeah.
So in the Disney version, they humanize the apes. Kerchak, of course, does not kill Kala's baby. It's killed by a giant cat.
Mm-hmm.
Kerchak is only guilty of he refuses to accept Tarzan into the ape family, but he changes his mind in the end.
Yeah, I know that they made Kerchak not quite so awful. Yay!
Yes, he's gruff, but he's not awful. You understand his motives better.
Mm-hmm.
He's driven by fear, but he's more human, even though he's a gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
And now Burroughs in Tarzan raises the question of which group is more violent and greedy. Is it the animals in the jungle, or is it humanity
In civilization. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that Burroughs intended it to be super clear cut. Mm-hmm. I think he kind of leans toward, it's civilization who's probably more brutal in the end. But in the Disney movie, you better believe that the humans are the bad guys. Because at the end, Tarzan, Jane, her father, Professor Porter, they're all fighting alongside the animals, riding elephants, and they're going to beat back the humans, because the humans, they're the greedy ones. So if you are a good human, then you side with wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly,
save the environment. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And also, we see in the first book by Burroughs that Tarzan leaves the wilderness for Jane. In the movie, Jane stays in the jungle with Tarzan. He never has to leave. And Archimedes Q. Porter decides he's going to stay too.
Yeah.
The movie did also completely eliminate any mention of a native population of Black people. They don't even touch it.
Right.
So the elements of colonialism are subdued. And Tarzan is seen as, yes, he's superior to humans in some ways. He's superior to animals in some ways, but it's not a main theme.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a main theme at all. In other ways, they are superior to him. So, I think that even though it's not really true to Burroughs' vision, other than he's a super athletic guy who talks to animals, I think that it did well in trying to speak to modern sensibilities, and I like that they chose that theme of adoption.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
And then, as you've mentioned, Alice, there's Greystoke, The Legend
Yeah.
of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, 1984. And this is, in some people's minds, the best Tarzan movie. And certainly everybody in the production is taking things so seriously.
Oh yeah. And I gotta admit, when this movie came out, I loved it. I just thought it was beautifully filmed. I thought Christopher Lambert was all that. I mean, the only thing I didn't like about it is I don't like the actress who plays Jane. I never liked her, so she was a pill in my mind.
I found that version, Jane was so tame. She never goes to the forest. She's sweet. You can't, fault her, but she's so tame.
Yeah.
I think there's something about even Burroughs's Jane, written in 1912, that the pull of wanting to live in the wild, you can feel her being drawn to this this animal instinct, and then you can also see the rational brain working. And so I thought that Burroughs's Jane was actually much more compelling.
Yeah, I think with the 1984 film, the focus of the film, they took away the so much in before that was all Tarzan and Jane, Tarzan and Jane, Tarzan and Jane. That was always like such a big part of the pop culture of this iconic character and these books and the films and the TV shows. And this film in 1984 kind of put Jane in the background into almost a nothingness and allowed some of the other themes in the book to take precedence. And they even built on some of those themes, you know, the whole relationship with the apes and the ape family. They gave him an ape father. That there was a scene I was going to try to play from the YouTube. I finally found the clip of it, of when Tarzan is in civilization, and a lot of his ape family tribe has been captured by poachers and, you know, people who were capturing animals and bringing them into civilization to sell them to zoos and whatnot. And there's a scene where he releases them, and one of them is his ape father, and the ape father is shot and killed, and it's just heartbreaking. It's just but I'm not gonna play the video because the video quality is so bad it's just terrible. It would ruin it. Just watch the movie. But themes of family, themes of belonging, themes of, you know, like you referenced Tarzan's inability to lie in the Korean story that you were looking at. In the 1984 version, Lambert plays Tarzan's character much like that. It's written that, you know, he doesn't know how to dissemble. He doesn't play the games that civilized people play, and so he speaks the truth. He just blurts things out. And there's, you know, so there's a lot more development for his character and the relationship with the animals and with other humans other than Jane that I think makes that movie so great. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And it's something that I would describe as, I think the plot is only partially Burroughs, honestly. I think that if we were to look at Tarzan's interaction with animals and Tarzan's interactions with humans, the animal parts are fairly accurate to the book. And I mean, even though they are, for a large part, they are human actors in ape suits.
Yeah.
They really studied. I mean, they studied Jane Goodall. You know, they got awards for costuming and makeup, or at least
it's very believable. It's very believable.
So for the 80s, they did a pretty darn good job.
Yeah.
Right. But you're right that it is less about Tarzan Jane and more about Tarzan Darno.
And everybody else, yeah, but especially Darno. And that was smart on their part, because Ian Holmes is just amazing. And, you know, so the camera should be on him a lot of the time.
Right. And Hugh Hudson, who was the director of that film, said, quote, that this film is about Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden. It's about the loss of innocence and about the evolutionary urge. This boy is discovered by a Belgian, Darno, and he's taught language. Up to that point, he's very contented, but Darno is the snake in the myth. He gives him the word, and from that point, you could say he's lost. The question is, does he have to go on to join society or not? The story asks you to consider how society lives, halfway between the apes and the angels, aspiring to go up, yet coming down there. It's about the battle of nature and nurture, nature and culture, a dilemma, a terrible dichotomy in us all. It's about the freedom of the jungle and the distortions and strictures of society, and how perhaps we can't do without either of them. And so this is why this movie, even though I think that it misses it with the plot, I think it catches the spirit of what Tarzan is about. And I think that's why it has really resonated with many lovers of the book Tarzan.
Yeah, I agree. I think it gave us a different layer to it, even in some ways. Yeah.
And I just have to tell you about, I just think it is beautiful how the director and the actor who plays Tarzan, at times when Tarzan is behaving in an animal-like way, you know, and he speaks in the language, you know, of the apes and ooh, and the screeches, you know, and things like that. At times, we as an audience are meant to admire and cheer for those things. Like there's a servant that's being beaten, human servant, and he starts throwing rocks like an ape, and then he leaps down like 2 stories.
Yeah.
And
To go protect this vulnerable servant who's being beaten. Yeah.
Right. So we are meant to, cheer for the animal side. And yet it's so disturbing to me that, okay, he's making out with Jane, they're getting it on. And in between these romantic kisses, he like gets on his haunches and he bounces around and says, ooh, ooh, ooh. And then goes back to making out.
Yeah, it's like
it's
creepy.
So uncomfortable.
It's a little creepy. Yeah.
But it's meant to be uncomfortable. And I think that they really did a beautiful job of, is he animal or man, which is, and even he says he's half and half.
Yeah. Yeah. Good analysis. I like that. Yeah. Watch that. I'm gonna have to watch that movie again now. I'm all re-inspired.
So my summary, and those are just 3 of the movies, but my summary is each version, especially the ones that are more recent, they have to reconcile changes in scientific and social thoughts since Burroughs wrote it a century ago. Even with the problematic elements, we do keep coming back to this story because of the central theme of identity, not just personal identity, but what is the nature of humanity? What are we? Are we animals? Are we better than animals? Are we worse than animals? Right. And which is better, that highly structured civilization or the seeming freedom of the wild, just like Deborah was saying.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it really is that, and like anytime you have those kind of questions, the classics are always have extremes in them. They always give us the extremes so that we as humans say, well, we got to meet somewhere in the middle. We got to find compromise, and that's what makes classics, right? There's really, really evil characters and really, really good characters. And in the real world, maybe we're a little more in the middle, and it's true about the extremes of racism and colonialism and humanity and all that stuff. There's extremes are in this book, and hopefully, books like this, even with the problematic content as it is, bring us a little closer to the middle somehow. I hope. I don't know, maybe. That's part of our goal. Join us next time as we continue with our workshop discussion for the 2021 NICE project.